Have you ever thought of writing a romance novel? Well, today I'm going to talk about the romance novel subgenres, not all of them, but some of the most popular. So join me if you are interested in learning about romance novels.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Method channel. I am Julia and I'm here to give you some writing tips and chat about writing on Fridays. So today I want to talk about writing a romance novel, and the reason that I want to do that is because I just did. I wrote a romance novel last year, well this year, in 2024. I decided early in the year that I wanted to write a Christmas romance. I'd never done that before, but romance is how I started my writing journey. I started as a romance writer. I wrote 4 romances for one publisher, for Kensington Publishing. Then I wrote a couple of romance-like novels. They were called chick lit novels. They were usually about a young 20-something-year-old woman who was searching for love or a perfect job, or usually lived in a big city, but there was always a romance in it. So I consider that still sort of romance writing before I moved on to writing women's fiction. But I hadn't written a romance in a long time, and I really missed the genre. I really wanted to write another romance. And I thought, and I'd never written a Christmas romance, and I decided, why not write one? I was watching Christmas movies last year and watched a bunch of them after a long semester of work, and decided, you know what? I like these. There's a lot of things, yeah, some people say they're kind of cheesy, and they're kind of all similar in a way, but they're not, right? And they do have one thing in common. They all have a happy ending. They all talk about the magic of Christmas, the magic of the holidays. And I love that. So I decided to write one. And you can see back there that I have the big poster board of my novel, Christmas Without You. And I'm just really excited. I just released it here just a week ago. So I thought, why not talk about romance novels today? So just to share with you, when I first started reading romance novels, I was probably, I don't know, 11 years old, 12 years old. And decided to switch from, the children's books in the library to the adult books. And there was this little turnstile that had a lot of little paperback books, and they happened to be romances. And I started reading them, fell in love with them. Then I remember going to these little bookstores back then, and they would sell them like for 10 cents a piece. So I would read tons of these books when I was young. And this is probably why I decided that I wanted to write one. When I was in college and I decided, I wanted to be a writer, the first thing I thought of was, I'm going to write a romance novel, because that's what I loved to read. So it helps to love romance in romance novels if you want to write a romance novel. You don't have to, but it sure helps, right? Because if you understand the genre, if you've read enough of them, it will it will, I want to say, come naturally to you, because you know how they flow. You start to get a feel of how the romance builds, when, what makes that critical climactic moment, how does it unravel, all of that, because you read so many of them. And again, I don't want to say that they're formulaic, because they're really not, but they do follow a pattern. And the more you read them, the more you're going to see the pattern, the more it's going to become more natural to you to write it. So I think the first thing I would say is I hope you like romance novels and enjoy reading them, because if you're going to write one, it helps to like reading them. Okay, so let's talk about the different subgenres. So you may not be like a huge romance, like really love romance books, but you may like other genres, and not mind having a romance as part of it. Okay, now I have to say that the romance genre, any subgenre that comes from the romance is the most important thing. Okay, so if you're writing, let's say, a romantic suspense, the suspense part is important, and the suspense part is going to be part of a big part of the novel. but not bigger than the romance. Okay, so you're not writing a suspense novel that has a little romance. You're writing a romance novel that has some suspense in it. Okay, so I just want to kind of make that clear. So let's talk about the different genres. So first of all, I'm going to start with contemporary series romance, and that is usually like your Harlequin type. So what makes it a series is not that the author is writing there are these, but it's not that the author is writing a series with all the same characters. This is different. This is like a personal series that an author writes. But the series romance, like the Harlequin types, they're usually a group of books, 6 to 8 books, let's say, that this publisher releases the same month. The stories are not related. The only thing that's related is the type of romance that it is. So it could be romantic suspense. It could be a romantic comedy. And so all the books in that series would be similar as far as that. So the way that they're tied together is by that category. Okay, so they call them different categories. So that would be your series, contemporary series romance. And again, there are a variety of them. So there could be a contemporary series romance that focuses on suspense, on romantic comedy, on a variety of things. Then there is the contemporary single title romance, and that is a single title. So it's not a series, doesn't come out with a bunch of other books that look all the same. So again, the series ones all have similar covers. They all say Harlequin, right? They all say the same thing. A contemporary romance is just that. It's just one book, one single title that is written by the author. Usually they're larger in size too. So a series book or a category book would be a, probably 55 to 60,000 words, where your single title can be closer to 100,000, sometimes 80, 75,000 words. And because it's contemporary, it just means that it takes place now, right? It takes place in modern times. Then there are the romantic comedy books. So if you are funny, if you like humor, that might be something to consider. If you ever watch like a romantic comedy, rom-coms, right? Movies, you know what a romantic comedy is. So it's a romance, but there's usually funny elements to it. Sometimes there's a subplot or secondary characters that add that comedic element to the story, but it tends to be just a more funny, a lighter romance. The contemporary romance does have deeper issues. Romantic comedy might not have those deeper issues because it tends to be a little lighter. Then there are the historical romances. Historical romances used to be anything before 1945. I don't know if that's when I started writing. It was like anything before 1945. That might have been moved up. Maybe it's anything before, the 60s or something, but the 1960s. But a historical romance is what it sounds like. It has a historical setting and can incorporate historical elements. You might have historical figures that appear. You might have, the clothes, the dress, all of that. I'm actually going to make another video just on writing historical romance, because the one previous to this romance was a women's fiction and it did have historical elements. So I will actually leave that for another video, but just know that it takes place in the past. There are historical figures, elements, settings that will place the reader into that time period. And of course, the romance is the main important thing in the story. There's also a subset of historicals, which are the Regencies, that are very popular. So these take place in England between the very short period of 1811 and 1820, when King George III was deemed unable to rule because of mental and health issues, and Parliament appointed the Prince of Wales to take over his duties. And so if you like books like Pride and Prejudice, that takes place like during the Regency period. Then there are inspirational romances, which are supposed to be bringing in the spiritual element, but mostly inspirationals are Christian. So when you hear inspirational, it's really a Christian romance. And so because they are Christian romances, they're very light on the sexual tension and all. Well, there is sexual tension, but it's all off camera. There's also the idea of a higher power, obviously, and the characters' beliefs in the higher power and in usually some kind of moral code is part of the story, a big part of the story. Romance is still the most important, but it's all under this umbrella of the Christian faith. Next is paranormal romance. Paranormal can include any kind of unhuman creatures. So you've got vampires, you've got werewolves, you've got what else? Demons, witches, right? Anything else. Kind of the opposite of the inspirational. It has all these paranormal elements and creatures that are part of the story. And these creatures will interact with the humans. And of course, again, you still have the romance that is the main important element of it, but you have it's set in this world where these other creatures exist. Usually the plots tend to be pretty complex and the characters are well developed. So they're really great books to read if you enjoy, that type of book, and fun to write if you enjoy writing paranormal. The next one is young adult. So young adult, very similar to the other ones. They can be contemporary. They can have paranormal elements in it as well, or magical realism, or any of that stuff. They're just usually written for readers who are about 12 to 18, although, usually over 16, kids tend to read just adult books. But, and honestly, a lot of adults will read the YA books. So very similar to other books. It's just that it deals with issues that readers between the ages of like 12 to 18 would deal with. And it does have high drama and a little bit less sensuality than an adult contemporary novel. And the opposite of that would be erotic romance, which obviously has more explicit sexual scenes, sensuality super high. The sexual engagement between the characters is pretty much in every single scene. But there does have to be a plot. There does have to be romantic elements in it. It's not just plain erotica. There is a plot, there is a story, but there is a lot of sexual engagement between the two characters. And so sci-fi romance is another category. That category has a lot of science-ish type elements in there. You're going to see futuristic things. You're going to see robots, machines. So you might see not only the different machines, but you might see like aliens and other creatures, maybe from other planets, because it's set so much in the future and it's whatever the author imagines. But it has a lot of maybe science-like terms and a universe that is drastically different from the one that we are used to living in. Then there's fantasy romance. So fantasy, maybe similar to some of your paranormal or sci-fi, but not exactly. So usually it has its own world. And you'll see a lot more magic, a lot more magical creatures. You might see dragons or fairies, or, so a little different. So not like this more, what I think, more scary type creatures like in paranormal, but more of the magical elements. The worlds are usually very elaborate and they have their own rule and culture. So fantasy, I think, is probably a lot of fun to write. A lot of the young readers, 20-something readers, really love fantasy. So it's a great genre to write in if that's what you like. But again, always remember it's romance. It's a romance, so it's fantasy romance, and so you want to make sure that that romance is strong in your story. Connected to that would be the urban fantasy, also, which takes place in modern times, usually in big cities. It can be kind of dark sometimes too, so it's more darker than a normal fantasy. Has those darker elements, sometimes a dystopian type future. So, but very similar to fantasy, just again, more of those darker elements. Okay, this is not an exhaustive list. I know there are military romances. I know there are medical romances. There is a lot of other romance subgenres. So really, it's a wonderful, wonderful genre to write in, because no matter what your interest, you're going to find a subgenre that you can write for. As long as you remember that the romantic relationship is the most important part of the book, because you're going to have romance readers reading it. You can really write almost any type of book that interests you, or any type of subgenre. Romance is very popular still. I think it's still one of the best-selling genres out there, and it's a lot of fun. So I do encourage you to look into it, to, use my small list here, and do your own research and see what it is, what do you like to write? What would be your favorite type of subgenre to write in? And do a little research, read some of those books, and write your own romance. Let me know if you do, because I love to read romance and I will probably buy your book. So thank you for joining me here for this short video. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. And again, I'm going to make one just for historicals, because I did write with Let Us Begin a historical type novel. And so I do want to go more in detail into what a historical is and how to write one. So that will probably be my next video next week. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.